Welcome to a special edition of Houston Dynamic Dynamo podcast. We have over here with you guys today the guru of stats, the CEO and creator of theowlstats.com. You can check more about them if you go to the website. They also have social media presence as well. Thiago Silveira. Thiago, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got to be where you are now as the CEO of this company?
Okay, thanks very much for inviting me. So basically, the company started about 2 years ago, but I've been working with stats for some time now, since 2011. So I started as a watcher, as they call it, smart odds. So basically, my job was to watch games and collect the stats. So we used to watch games from all over the world, from so many leagues. My first game in the office was a Welsh league game. So it was quite interesting. I never thought in my life I would watch the Welsh league. But then things improved a little bit. It started moving on to some better games and all that. So then moved to some other teams in the company. Then I became an analyst. So I was the Brazilian analyst in the company for a few years. I work remotely, but I did it for a few years. So I specialized in analyzing the Brazilian league. Then I moved on to another company, and then I did a lot more in terms of analysis of leagues. So basically, I was overseeing the work of a team of analysts covering South America. So then that's when I started thinking about this job, about how we could help individual players, how we could help football clubs find talent, and also help players to improve their performance based on numbers. So so I formed Stats about a couple of years ago in the UK, but the start of our operation mostly was in Brazil. So we worked with some clubs in Brazil. And then our workforce mostly was based in Brazil as well. But then we moved on to some other markets, and now we're helping quite a few players. We have contracts with clubs in different countries, USA, Portugal, Brazil, and we have players from different leagues as well. And then we help players from all levels, players from some state leagues in Brazil, but we have help players in some other countries as well. So that's what our stat does.
That's very good. That's like back then you'd see these scouts, trying to find these diamond in the rough talents. They'll bring a pen and a paper. They'll write some stuff down. Sometimes a lot of agents you'll see in clips and things like that. And the power of agents was especially major up till like I would say maybe 5 years ago. Of course, some agents still have a lot of power, and whatever the agent says, that they'll be basically the signing that the team will do because of their relationship of trust. And of course, the agents will be very friendly with certain scouts and things of that nature to find that diamond in the rough. But nowadays you started seeing teams that want to do their own thing now. They want to kind of branch out of it, and they want to find these things. They want to use these companies such as your own and contracting these services where they want to be more independent. They don't want to be binded by just whatever the guy has, the agent has, but more like, okay, let me see what's out there. Show me with data, show me with proof and evidence. Okay, I know that what I'm going to see, it's going to be the clips and the highlights, and maybe the games you're sending to me are the best games he did, but I need to see like in full scope, game by game, his progress and things of that nature. And tell me how important that is actually for how soccer is changing on that level of stats.
Well, that's absolutely crucial with football today. But what the kind of work that we do, we can help agents as well. So we have partnerships with different agents because they want to make their work more professional, even presenting it to the clubs. So they want to have the best possible presentation. So they want to have a number of games, videos, and stats from all so many different metrics. And that's very important. And I think as a whole, football is changing. Football is more professional. Football is more dynamic. and we need this kind of work in order to make it better. So what we really want to do is to really help clubs get the best talent possible for what they're looking for. Because sometimes when you only rely on a certain individuals to get the talent that you need is not very efficient. So you want to know if the player would adapt in that environment as well, because sometimes some players would not adapt in some leagues, you know, and that's very important as well, because you know, some examples, some Brazilian players wouldn't really want to play in very cold countries, you know, and it's kind of important to have that information in place as well before you sign a player, because obviously you paying a lot of money for this player, you hoping that this player is going to improve your team, it's going to, you know, it's going to improve the squad, and then when he actually is there to make that, you know, change, you know, if the player doesn't adapt, he doesn't want to live in that country. So there's a lot of things involved as well, not only numbers, but also we go a little bit further. We want to know, like, you know, everything that's behind that transfer.
And tell me a little bit about it, because, for example, you know, covering the Houston Dynamo, a lot of people complain that the team does fairly well, or has done fairly well in the past until the summer comes. And the summer over here in Houston, it's very odd. It's excruciating odd, you know. And a lot of times I see that the players are just basically flat tired towards the end of the game, you know. And I mean, you are in Houston, you are practicing in this weather and things of that nature. That's kind of like what you're saying, you know, like, yeah, there is, like, of course, the cold weather, but there's also like the opposite of it, like too hot. Even for Brazilian players, this can be a little bit odd over here. And so tell me, like what kind of like specific research goes in it, you know, because obviously you know, they playing in these countries, right? And they only accustomed to that weather because that's the only weather they are being, you know, unless they becoming international players and they go play overseas and things like that. But tell me, like, you know, like, of course it's easy to talk to these players, you know, but what else goes more into it? Getting to know the player, getting to talk to him, or like also seeing some kind of the methodology that they work and how they work. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I think it's kind of important when you selling a dream to a player. I mean, obviously, most of our work is number based. So we go to so many different leagues all over the world, and then we assess these players and then see, you know, who has potential to go to, you know, what our clients are looking for. But before that move, we want to speak to that reps. We want to speak to the family. We want to know if that player would adapt in this kind of environment. I think a Brazilian player, you know, used to a high level in Brazil, playing, you know, in the major divisions in Brazil, they would be fine. They would be okay with it, because you know, players in the Serie A and B, they kind of like travel up and down the country. So they play really sometimes in the winter, cold, you know, weather games in the south, and then 3 days later they are up north playing in the hot weather. So the players are kind of used to it. But then when you're talking about a player coming, you know, from a youth system, you know, if that's their first move, imagine a player playing a really hot place in, you know, in Rio, and then this player has to go to Iceland, has to go to Norway, and you know, even England. You know, it can be quite challenging. So there's a lot of things involved when you think about transfers.
That's pretty interesting, you know, and that's kind of like with MLS nowadays. There's a lot of talk. How can we convince? Okay, let's say that, you know, we use the services, you know, and we got the data, we got everything set up, right? And we seeing, maybe we found someone that we are ahead of the game, maybe a 17-year-old, right, that is really good, you know, that's showing really promising. Then maybe some teams in Europe are sleeping on it. Okay, and let me say that okay, I'm ready to contract him, but that's the next step. This player thinks that maybe if he spends maybe a few more months, right, and he goes to like plays in the first Brazilian league, right, maybe if he can shine and show his potential, right, maybe he can just lure out some lower tier team in the European division, right, rather than coming to the MLS and get some minutes, quality minutes already in the MLS as a 17-year-old. And tell me, like, parts of like convincing also that maybe the MLS is improving, it's getting better, even from a standpoint of a young player coming over here, maybe just doing 2-3 years and then going to Europe, because maybe now Europe is starting to pay more attention to the MLS as well. Because a lot of the times I see that the MLS, the key to success on a lot of these teams is finding players from teams that are fighting against relegation on major European divisions. I mean, and even then, I mean, the money, because the money over here, I'll be honest with you, I look at the contracts, and some of these players get paid a lot more than they pay than they get paid in the Portuguese league, for example. I was comparing a Portuguese league the other day with the salary of the Dynamo, and it was actually Sporting. I'm going to say it was Sporting Lisbon versus the Houston Dynamo, and for example, Herrera making 5 million a year, and I mean, no Sporting player making anything even remotely close to it. But the promise, I mean, that's why you can get players that are close to retiring coming to the MLS, because the money, and then of course the lifestyle that America might bring is captivating to the families. But to young player, he sees his journey as starting now, so every decision is big to what might be the outcome of it. And so tell me, like, sometimes, like, how much can the MLS is changing and is starting to be more seen and respected overseas, from even me trying to hire you and then you find me the player, but then how can I convince this player if he has if let's say offer from the Portuguese first division in a smaller team that is fighting relegation versus, let's say, the Dynamo? How can we even like try to convince this player?
Well, I mean, I can see a drastic change in the MLS over the past few years. I was living in Canada for a year in 2014, and I could see the country, they moving towards, improving their league and all that. And I can see the MLS improving quite substantially. And I think for a Brazilian player, obviously their dream is to play in the top 5 leagues in Europe. And I believe the best MLS players as well, they would like to play in Europe at some point, because football is decentralized in Europe in terms of recognition. However, over the past few years, I can see like a massive improvement. But convincing a player, it depends a lot on the level. But I can see good players, Brazilian players now going to the MLS. I can see them because there's a few things to consider as well. The American lifestyle could be one of the points that you could convince a player to go to the MLS. But I think the top players would always rather to go to Europe first, because there's the Premier League, the La Liga, but I can see players now going to the MLS as well. But yeah, it's improving. I mean, when you compare what the level of the MLS now to what it was in '96, is a completely different league. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's a conversation I've been having with a lot of people. I mean, I came up with the youth levels of Sporting Lisbon when I was in Portugal, when I was younger, and and then eventually I came to America and I started coaching in high school and things of the nature. And I saw that I kind of felt like I went on a time machine and I went back 20 years in terms of development, and that's kind of like what I started seeing, what I was seeing here. But now I see in the last 2 years, there's a drastic change. I mean, even like teams starting to hire you guys, that I think that before, maybe 2-3 years ago, that wasn't really a thing that wasn't done here. Statistics weren't necessarily used in soccer, in America, at least they weren't used to. And nowadays they're starting to use statistics, not just like you're saying, you work with individual players as well. But even in practices, it's crucial. How can we practice with the purpose of not only getting our individual players better, but how can we get better as a team? So like, what kind of like methods do you say that statistics help even for practices, not just for games, obviously, but for practices as well?
Well, I think it's, as I said before, statistics is absolutely crucial to the work of most clubs now. So the kind of work that we do, we kind of analyze every single player in the squad. and then we see the areas that they can improve on. So we can show them footage of things that they need to, that habits that they have that probably, nobody ever told them. Sometimes some long balls or some, passes that they need to improve on. And statistically, it's quite easy to detect this kind of behavior. So what we do, so when we work with players or individuals, we kind of like tell them the areas they need to improve on, and they kind of like apply that into their training sessions and then games later on. So it's absolutely crucial. I think most teams now they have to have this kind of work behind, and so I think it's getting more and more, and then more people are going to hire this kind of service.
Yeah, that I absolutely agree. I mean, you're starting to see now even players now they're starting to use the gym more than ever before. I never really seen like growing up, it was like it wasn't really done. I mean, you would practice on your tactical skills, on your technique as well, and that's the things you'd really try to improve. Speed, maybe, major speed, but you not so much on even bodybuilding, the aspect of lifting weights and things of that nature. So of course, when you look at the data and things like that, you can tell that maybe there's some movements that are done wrong specifically, and maybe even like the team chemistry that they're not really connecting passes and things of that nature, and the radius that he's covering is maybe more towards one side than the other, using the hit map and things like that, and the amount of accuracy in passing and things like that. But even like in terms of like the gym and the working out and things that they can improve physically that maybe are being neglected. That's why they're making these mistakes on the field. Is that also something that it goes along with that?
It depends. I think what I do is more related to their numbers. So things that we see a pattern and things that we see that they can improve on. So basically, if they are making the same mistakes, time and time again. So for us, it's quite easy to see because we analyzing every action that the player is performing on the pitch. So yeah.
So when you started, and you told me about like smart odds and things like that. Obviously, it's owned by Matthew Benham, which is the owner of Midtjylland and Brentford. And of course, I mean, if you really like a Cinderella team, it's Brentford in the Premier League, and now they are, I believe, they're the fifth youngest roster in the Premier League. And how well they use the scouting new talent, to be able to go down there. And a lot of people look at things such as, well, Vegas is never wrong. The betting odds are never wrong, but Vegas has been doing it before sports were really doing it, but people were betting it based on the odds of Vegas and or against it by the eyeball test of a fan, right? But it's amazing to see that really and truly these betting agencies were way out of the game, because all they were doing, they weren't watching the games because they don't have enough people to watch all the games, but they were doing statistics, analytics, and things of that nature, just based on previous games, on previous results and movements of players and things like that, to be able to tell you, well, this is the odds, and people are not playing with money, well, the fans are playing with money, but not these companies are playing with money. So like, tell me a little bit, like how much, like, someone that doesn't really believe in what you're saying, because a lot of fans are just like, I know every fan is a coach, right? And every fan thinks they know what they're talking. And I'm not even debating that. But the truth is the game has gone it's beyond now how much you know about soccer. You have to now prove it. It's almost like doing a research paper. You have to prove it by what you're saying, by statistics, by data, by movements, by video clips, by whatever it is, So like, tell me like how much you think that like these betting agencies were aware of the game, and in many ways they were dictating the outcome of the game, and they were showing it by evidence that the outcome of the game was actually indeed the right one.
Well, basically they used a lot of predictive data for that kind of an analysis. So they watched. I mean, I never bet myself. I was always working as an analyst, providing data to professional gamblers. But we used to be very specific about the data that we collected. We watched many games. We analyzed games properly. So we had a system in place where we obviously check the players who are not playing, the impact of every player on the pitch. But anyway, so it's the kind of information that absolutely is very, very important. I think a lot of people tend to disagree with statistics that it really helps. Obviously, you need to have a good team, but you can apply stats to find good players. And once you have a good team, you can apply the stats in order to improve your performance or to adjust things that you're not doing properly. So things like XG, XA, XT, it used to be quite complex a few years ago, but now everyone is doing it. So basically, the kind of a thing that I think most clubs need to be aware of. You're not gonna be successful finding players without applying that. And you can be lucky one season and put a team together, win a league, but it's pure out of luck. And if you want to have consistent results, you need to be paying attention to numbers.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and people, I think they out of nowhere, you started seeing these young coaches bringing new mentality, new ideas, and it works. I mean, you look at Arteta with Arsenal, with the youngest team in the Premier League. It's no mistake that they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it. And they, if you don't innovate, if you don't bring something new, then if you're doing something that everyone else is doing, then you're just gonna, with a much less budget, you're just probably not going to be able to succeed. And of course, you need to create a team that gels well together and things of that nature. But you mentioned lightly about the SG and things like that, obviously expectation of goals and things of that nature. So like, explain me for like the average listener, why is that important and how you are even able to calculate these data in things of that nature?
Well, so basically we have a team of analysts, people watching games, and we have statisticians and people like that. So we always, changing our XG the way we collect it. And XG is a very powerful tool, but we have so many other metrics as well, especially when it comes to individual analysis. It has to be improved pretty much every month. We need to come up with something different. Some breaking line passes, but we need to improve the way we collect it. We need to train our team constantly. So it's kind of, it's very challenging, but at the same time, it's amazing when you see the results, when you're working with players, you see their improvement. And sometimes when we have meetings with them and then you kind of like show them the data, and they get really impressed with the things that they see, because we are analyzing everything they do on the pitch, and this is absolutely rewarding for us as well. So it is a very challenging industry, but at the same time very rewarding as well.
Yeah, so tell me about that relationship. Let's say a team gets you guys, right? And tell me about the relationship and how much you guys need to be connected with the coaching, because you can just throw the data, right? And I can be the coach, and of course I'm gonna have my own ideas about what I just saw, or about but like, tell me like what kind of relationship there is, or even if there's, I guess some teams, they want to have their relationship, some coaches would do, but then some coaches, they just want the data, they don't really need like any more information aside from that. So tell me like how sometimes they might change from team to team.
It's a mixed bag, really. So sometimes some clubs really embrace it, some teams really embrace it. So the technical team, the coaches really like our work, and they are always waiting for after the match to see the results, and they really embrace the work. When that happens, it's amazing for us, because we know that we are able to help, especially when there is some interest from them. Because sometimes, some clubs, they just want to get the data, they do their own thing, they don't really have that interaction. But I think most clubs that we work with, they really trust us, and we have a lot of information, and so they are the ones that we are able to help most. So yeah.
Tell me how much the like the data is reliable. I mean, for example, like the other day I was talking to someone and we are talking about Chermty, which is a striker, young striker for Sporting Lisbon, and he's 17, but on the youth levels, I remember that he did about 6 games, and then all of a sudden he gets boosted to the first team, and not only gets boosted to the first team, but is on the starting lineup and is playing in the Europa League. And I mean, you can look at his physique, tall, strong guy. He makes sense. He's like 6 foot, 6'5" or so. And but tell me, like, because in my opinion, he got boosted not so much based on like the amount of games that he played, but with the amount of data that maybe was collected in the games that he played, and then compared, he was able to fit the style that the coach was looking for in a striker, that he didn't need it in the roster and he didn't have enough budget to sign a new guy. And of course, this guy is young. So if he actually improves and he shows up that he's good, we can sell him later on, which is a lot of the problems with a lot of these teams, is that they are just cultivating new talent to then be able to resell it because it is their asset. But show me, like, because in my opinion, the only way that he got minutes was not because of the amount of games that he did, but based on the stats that he was able to put in just those few games, that was able to connect with what the coach was needing.
Well, I mean, they have to do their own assessment on the player, and in most cases they would be analyzing a lot of data. But there's a lot of things involved as well, because when a player comes through the youth system, it takes time to adapt. Especially a club like Sporting, we're talking about one of the biggest clubs in Europe, a huge club in Portugal. So it sometimes some players, it's kind of a scary environment for them, for some of them. Some of them really don't, they adapt really well. We have the same example in Brazil. So this Endrick, this guy who was signed by Real Madrid. He's 16. Obviously, he won't be able to move to Madrid before he's 18. But he had an amazing campaign in the under 20s in Brazil. He was scoring a lot of goals, amazing stats, really good player, strong, fast, a knife for goal, really. But he was promoted to the first team, and it took some time for him to adapt, and then he wasn't really scoring, and the fans were really putting a lot of pressure, and the press as well. So that's kind of a player who's 16. I mean, it's kind of weird that people are expecting so much from him already, playing for probably the best team in Brazil. So it's quite tricky, that, isn't it?
And I think that's where it comes, like, there's every level, and even every team, you go from one team to another, the system is different, the challenges are different. Of course, if you go from youth 20 under 20 to the major league, then of course the gap of skills and speed and things of that is much different. But tell me, this is where I guess it gets that 101, like where you guys come in and tell the player, hey man, this is what you missed, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong, this is what you need to improve, this is what you need to work on, and tell me how important it is. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, like there's coaches that still are a little bit skeptical about these change, the way especially the older coaches, right, about using data and things like that, but also there's a lot of young talent players and older players that think they know what they're doing and it works for them because they're already older, right, and they already reach a certain level of success. But there's younger guys that just are too cocky, right? I mean, think about him, the example you told me, 16, right? He has the world, it's his, right? And then you got like the fathers too, the family members that put stuff on their ears as well, and agents and all that. But tell me, like, how much like it's important for a player to actually listen to like the stats, because the stats are speaking for their own game by evidence, by showing it, and how much it is sometimes when you do say you have this relationship one-on-one with the players as well, but how important it is for these players to be able to receive it and not just, I guess, hear it, but actually listening.
I mean, that's we work with quite a few players, and the ones that we absolutely love to work with are the ones who receive feedback and apply and then try to change. And obviously, it would be so arrogant from my side to say that that's the only way in football. And I understand why some coaches are not really keen on stats because they're not really used to it. And I understand that. And I'm not, the one who would criticize them because of that. So I think people have different ways of working. And but we had examples before where we people kind of like reluctant and they didn't really want to have us working with them. But then when they saw what we actually did, they were completely changed their mind. So we had examples like that as well. So I think players, coming back to your questions, young players, if they listen, because as you said, sometimes it's just showing them the evidence, and sometimes it's just little things that need to improve on that would completely, change their game, put them in a different level. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the way forward in football. I think there's a lot of potential for players to improve their performance, and that's the kind of thing that we want to do.
There's there's a lot of things that I see it, the basic data that has been used for years, and you still see it at halftime, right? Possession of ball, corners, fouls, yellow cards, red cards, and all that. And I think that's kind of, to me, it's insignificant. In many ways, it doesn't really translate nothing. You can have a lot of possession, and then you can be down 2-0 on counterattack. So that means nothing, And but like, tell me now, I think the game is changing so much, and I've spoke lightly the other day on the podcast about how I start seeing these, especially these younger guys, right? These younger coaches that have assistants that are on the bench and are almost like in real time, not only like reviewing some plays, because the game is being recorded and they're able to rewind certain plays and things like that and show the coach what was done right or not, and maybe some gaps that they seeing it on the field. But like, tell me, like, how I think the game is going to be added where coaches are using, maybe just even at halftime, these stats, right? And maybe seeing the gaps on the field and things like that, they can explore that maybe they weren't exploring, even changes of formation in real time. Because I see it in the MLS now, and a lot of coaches too, but I see that back then you'd have a coach that you'll play with the same formation. It was 4-4-2, 4-3-3, whatever it was, and it was from the first game till the last game of the season. And now I'm starting to see that it depends on the team that you faced, the strategy is different. Or I see if it doesn't work throughout the first games, he goes to another strategy. So like, tell me like how much, like, we almost, the game is becoming like FIFA almost, like FIFA 23 on the PlayStation. And if it's not working, we need to change it. We need to change it quick. Or if the game is completely locked, we're changing in real life, because there's going to be a few minutes until the other coaches figures out how we are able to change it. And maybe those minutes can be the gap where we can create an opportunity of goal and score it. So tell me, like, because in my opinion, looking from the outside, these stats are getting so wild in a positive way and so much used by some coaches that are almost used like in real lifetime. So tell me like about a little bit about it, and maybe like some of the softwares that are even used to be able to access that.
Yeah, this live data is very important. We work with live data with some clubs that we work with. So there was a good example last year. I was watching a game with this club president and his son, and some people there as well. And at halftime, I had my team doing some live data, and then I showed them that the score wasn't very fair because they were winning the game by 1 goal. So I showed the data and said, look, you guys were basically, you should have been 2-0 down. So obviously they were not very happy about it, but the game ended 4-2. So the under 20 coach was there watching the game as well, and then he was quite impressed with that. So basically, he invited me to work with them. So we started working with them, and they got to a final and a semi-final of a state league. So something that they hadn't achieved in quite a long time. So there's kind of data and anything that can make you more competitive. Basically, who is winning the game? The players, the coaches. they are the ones who put the strategy in. They are the ones, making the effort. They are the ones with the tricks, with the ability and the technical skills. However, if you are able to add a little bit more to your game, the stats are the thing which is actually improving your game. So that's the kind of thing I speak to a lot of the coaches and players. That margin, that small margin that you can gain just by looking at the stats and applying properly, that's absolutely huge, because that could win you a game basically. So football is very competitive today. So anything that you can add to a game in order to improve it, I think is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with it. And nowadays, you mentioned the under 20th coach and things of that nature. And a lot of times, like a lot of teams, they use like the younger teams to try to do things that maybe are not necessarily the most conventional things, to try it out to see if it works. And I think I can relate now to the MLS Next Pro, which is I don't know this. I don't want to call. I called it this past week the second division of the MLS, but that's not necessarily right, because it's basically just I would say it's the under 20th, I guess, the under 20th league of the MLS, because it's a bunch of younger players, and I see the way they are doing it. It's almost becoming like a laboratory, where people are trying things, and of course they're trying talent, but they trying much more things than that, and I mean, you see soccer is changing so much quickly. If you told me maybe 5-6 years ago that the VAR would exist, I will tell you that I don't believe it, and now there's people there that they want to make soccer kind of like basketball, where if the ball is out of bounds, let's stop the clock, let's not waste any minutes, and so like, tell me, because I think that everybody that is younger in soccer, of course, rejuvenates every 5-10 years as each generation gets pushed out playing wise and the new one comes in. But like, tell me, what do you envision not only does the game of soccer to become in a worldwide level, and of course maybe even the MLS, but like how much in terms of statistics, and you said it a little bit ago, it's very competitive, this market, and the way that is collected and how it's changed and formulated and things like that is changing. So tell me some of the new innovations and where you think this is going to be added.
Well, as I said, football is changing, and so drastically as well, and so quickly, because I think there's more. Obviously, the Premier League is so rich now. It's kind of unfair to the other leagues, but there's so many other markets as well. So many other markets. You see Saudi Arabia now, some leagues in Middle East, and Chinese players, Japan, and Australia, and so many countries, so many different leagues. Every day they add into a new competition. So I think, that is becoming more and more competitive, but also it's giving more opportunities. So as you said, the MLS Next Pro is a great example. It's a lab for young players, and it's amazing. And there's so many things being implemented in football, because it's becoming more professional, and also there's more money involved. A lot of billionaires buying clubs, a lot of companies getting involved. In Brazil now they changed the law, so now clubs are allowed to have owners. So clubs are being getting bought out by different people. So the club supporting Brazil, Ronaldo, the legend Ronaldo, bought the club. So basically they have to be more professional in so many ways. So even you said VAR, because one bad decision can completely change, destroy your season. So imagine if you're out of the Champions League, the previous season you worked so hard to get top 5, top 4, top 5, and then next season because of one decision you're out of the competition. So then you lost all your planning, all the investment. So they need to find new ways of improving the game and improving, you know, the way referees see the game and all this kind of thing. So I think it's very good.
Tell me, as I was thinking, you're saying that in over here in the MLS we have a it's almost becoming like a little bit of like a debate where you see in professional sports over here sometimes more than having a good coach, you need to have a good general manager. And the manager is the one that I guess deals with the contracts and things like that. The coach can make a list of like, I don't know, certain 10 players or so, and then work around it. But I mean, these 10 players are quite different players, and so tell me, like for example, Dynamo is a new coach this season, Ben Olsen, and 15 players left the team, and he's still trying to figure out, and he's still making new signings and players that kind of fit his scheme. Some people are scared that younger players are not going to necessarily have enough minutes because he's bringing more veteran leadership into the team and improving players and things like that. But tell me, like when a team gets you guys, right? And let's say it's the first year that a coach joins the program. And I know that every team does things differently, every coach and whatever. But like, tell me, like when preparing to make a new team, okay, like what is like some of the things you're starting to see? Because obviously some coaches only care about talent. Some coaches only care about players that fit his scheme. And we just talked a little bit ago that maybe one scheme of playing doesn't work if it's just one tactical scheme, and tell me tell me that maybe how can you make it a good, or maybe it's about personality in the locker room, leadership, and you talked a little bit about it, how important it is sometimes for players to have a certain character. And I read an interview that he did that there was a player that had a certain problem. I forgot his name, and then you reached out your contacts because something surfaced from 2018 or something that was kind of critical, and then you did your due diligence and you said, well, that was in the past. That's not really how this player is, so that's not going to be a cancer in the locker room. So like, tell me, like, what do you see that it's like the most important things that you're starting to see that these coaches are looking for when setting up a new team?
I mean, I have to say it's a very, very tricky task. I was helping this club in Brazil for a little bit to find players, and I was getting in touch with the players' reps and all that, the agents. But I was talking to the coach a lot, and we used to talk once a week, a couple of times a week, in order to try to find the best players for the team, and they didn't have a big budget, so it was very difficult. And I can imagine for a bigger club where you have all the pressure from the press and all that. I think it depends a lot as well on the size of the club and the current situation of the club, because I think football, for it to be to work properly, so you have like philosophies of play and all that. So I think if you have managers that are not in line with the philosophy that you have in the club, that can destroy a whole season. And sometimes they hire coaches just to save them from relegation, for example, because they give it to a coach that starts the work. I'm talking a lot about Brazilian football, but if you have a coach that starts the season, he made several signings and all that. Halfway through the season, it doesn't work out. Then they are on relegation zone or anything like that. So then they need to find a coach that is good enough to keep them safe. And then next season, he's going to get sacked because it doesn't go with the philosophy of the club. Because the fans, let's say if you are, if the fans are used to a team that's very attacking, very fast, and they're not going to get used to a manager who loves defending all the time. And I see that happening all the time. And even sometimes in England, you saw a lot of really good coaches not doing a good job. So Man United, it takes years for you to have a good team and a proper. If you want to have proper football, you need to have some years where you slowly start to get your DNA together. So you have your players, the players that you really like, and then you need time. And sometimes coaches are not given time. I mean, in most cases, they are not given it time at all. So if you have a bad run, a few games that you're not able to deliver, you out of the game. It happens a lot. So it's difficult. Football is not an easy game. So yeah. So for me, philosophy is the most important thing in football. So clubs like Barcelona, so they from their academy, they know the way they play. They have a certain style of play from a very young age, and then that reflects all the way to the top, and that's the way it should be really. But then you need resources. You need sometimes you need names because these clubs like Barcelona, they are completely broke at the moment by still managing to sign players because they have a big name and players want to play for them, and that's the way it is. So.
Well, it's interesting, like because there's a big difference, I believe. Some clubs see it a big difference. The mentality is more the youth levels is about not so much the results, but more about producing individual talent, right? That's what I'm focused on because that's what I need, because what sells is the A team, right? That's where the revenue comes. And then you see others that it's results all the way. It doesn't matter if it's the under 12 team or the under 20 team. It's about results, and I don't care so much about the specific players. And I see in America, for example, I believe that like the development is more about money from the parents, from the team gets from the parents by the players paying a monthly fee to be part of, which is completely different than the way it's overseas. The way it's overseas, it's you do the tryouts and you lucky enough make it to the team, and then you're going to grow with the team, and every year you get challenged and things of that nature. But over here, there's more like a perception and idea that, well, you either way play high school or you play club soccer, and then you spend so much money on club soccer that some clubs don't even allow you to go back and play high school, because in high school you don't get paid for it and you might get injured. And then the teams, like the Dynamo, they have a lot of youth levels in schools all around, like 4 or 5 in the Houston area, for example. And I started seeing, and then I talked to some coaches, and I'm not going to mention names or anything like that, but they don't have necessarily enough knowledge or skills to develop anybody. And it becomes like a money grabber more than anything else. And I believe that in Brazil, if you go to certain levels, you're going to see that as well, with especially agents and things like that promising everything. And you see a lot of scams that unfortunately are still done, where the players are and the families are paying money for tryouts and to go somewhere else and do it, and based on because we've been talking about elite level, right? I mean, these teams are elite if they're looking for YAL, because they're really looking for their next step. But tell me, how much do you see that the youth level can not only benefit from using YAL data, but from how much coaches that maybe are not even necessarily the most knowledgeable can really use the data and then translate it into, okay, now I'm going to make these players better, my team better, but maybe I'm now progressing these 16-year-old into slowly becoming a lot better from 16 to 17 than just from 16 to 17 just becoming the same player that he was, because I see that a lot of talent over here, and even they come from El Salvador and Honduras and amazing technical skills and abilities, but they're just not fronting to the right people, the right connections, the right coaches, and the talent is just wasted. It goes nowhere. And because the unfortunately the coaches don't just, and they, some of them, they try their best, but they just don't know nothing, and they don't even know how to find these resources. The problem is they don't even know how to. There's so much stuff out there online that a lot of it, 90% is baloney. So how can I? Because we talked about XG and all that, right? And I believe that most listeners, maybe from even the Houston area, might not even have no clue what that is in the first place. And even if they have a clue, I'm looking at it, but how can I dissect the data after you introduce it to me? And how much different it is from the youth level to the major level.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic, because one of the reasons I really wanted to have this business was because I really wanted to help players, and obviously help football in general, because we see a lot of talent wasted. and in most cases because they don't find the right fit for their talents. And but there's some other reasons that players sometimes don't really advance to the next level. Sometimes it has something to do with their behavior off the pitch. It has to sometimes has to do with the personality, and sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes they're not very lucky, and it happens, right? But one of the reasons I really like what we do, and I really believe that what we do can really transform the way a lot of people see football. Sorry, I've been calling football the whole time soccer.
I get it.
Yeah, so basically, sometimes because they don't have the right data, they don't have the right contact, they don't have. So the work that we are doing here is not only the data itself, it's the network that we are building. So we want to collaborate with different levels, different people. We really want to be at the center of a lot of things happening, in football. So I think having a talent wasted for me is very sad, because a player with a lot of talent, when they are not able to get to the top, is devastating for the family, devastating for them, because sometimes it's their way out of poverty, it's their way out of a dangerous life. So if they're not performing in a good level, and sometimes they can't even play in not so much good leagues, because sometimes they think they're going to get to a level. If they don't get there, they completely give up. And there's so many other places, so many other leagues that he could benefit from playing. So it's sometimes it's lack of information as well. And yeah, and obviously, as in any other industry, football there's a lot of good and bad people. So yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is the case with every business, period. And yeah, that's interesting, and I mean, and I believe that, just touching one thing that for example, in high school in America, you can't necessarily have an iPad on the bench, for example. So like even trying to change things in real time, it doesn't happen. Yeah, you can record the game, to later on scout it, and they use basic software that breaks down plays and things like that, and they upload it to the system, and the system captures certain things, but it's very rudimentary and doesn't necessarily filter the right amount of information. But I see that there's their level of schools applying pressure to these high school coaches that it's results. We care about results, even already in high school. Even though I'm only added players that are assigned to my high school, I cannot recruit players, right? But hey, this is what you got over here. So work with it. You get the JV team, the varsity team, and develop your JVs for 3 years till they come to the varsity as seniors and be good and compete against, let's say, a town that has club soccer that gets all the players from club soccer and they're loaded with talent. And I got these guys here that some of them look like donuts, and I'm supposed to work with that talent, and then it can be overwhelming sometimes because, yeah, I mean, some skills, you have some areas that you can work with, but then you got nothing in terms of numbers to prove that. How can the before and after, how is this guy improved from last month to this month? And a lot of coaches, unfortunately, the only thing they use is specific drills and timing. I timed you last month, and now this month you 5 seconds quicker. I mean, and that's good, but tell me how much important that is now to bring that all the way from a youth level, because I believe that, yeah, in the pros are using it because they got the resources, they got the money, got the pressure as well. But tell me how much these actually can benefit not just individual clients, but individual coaches. They can individually then assess that to individual players, especially at 14, 15, 16, and maybe how much the game is changing to these schools, these under whatever's 14, 15, 16 are now maybe starting to also look at the data, not just the pro teams.
Oh yeah, if you can start using it from a very young age, I think the players can benefit from it massively. Because there's so many like habits that young players do have, and if you can like stop that from a young age and showing them on a regular basis the areas that they can improve on, and obviously the areas that they are good at. And even like sometimes positions when you kind of like you think that you are a good fullback, but the numbers are not really your favor. So then moving positions as well is kind of important. So players could excel in some other positions. We've seen that over the years. I remember Ramirez, the one who played for Chelsea. When the coach changed his position, I mean, he was already a pro, but when the coach changed his position, the guy he improved massively, and then he was sold to Benfica, if I'm not wrong, for a substantial amount of money. Then he moved to Chelsea, and then at Chelsea he was playing different roles. He was playing right mid, box to box. He was even playing as a winger every now and then. So that kind of data, when you have that from a young age as well, that can really benefit the players and the
Yeah,
coaches.
yeah, that's something that we also saw with the Dynamo this season. Like we have the left back is converted, position, and the fans. I'm reading the fans. They're like, oh my god, this coach is brilliant. Ben Olsen is a brilliant guy, man. He put a guy that never played in that position, and now he's excelling at it. And what's going to happen? Is he going to go back to their position or not? Because they just sired Eric Sviatchenko from Midtjylland, but. And I don't. It's not a miracle. It's he used the data to see that maybe it could be adapted to that new position, and he's excelling at it. And that's kind of like what you're saying. Even in the pros, that can still exist. Especially and these players they have a higher IQ and knowledge from the game than the younger guys. But that's what you see. Sometimes you can change the positions of the players, and things can, unlock the game, becoming much better to it. And see, for the average fan, nothing, you can look at it and you're like, well, like this is brilliant. Yeah, it's brilliant, but there's homework that was done. There was like data in things that are proven that they really worked well with it. We talked about like the SG and not to really touch with it, but like, for example, Dynamo talks about like how Corey Bird is a player that he benched Sebastian Ferreira, which has been a good striker, and he finalizes the ball very well and things of the nature, but he doesn't apply pressure from the go. He's not that striker. He's kind of like Ronaldo, right? He's not going to apply pressure from the front. But Bird is a player that is not a good finisher, not better than Sebas, but he's the guy that is going to hustle and he's going to apply pressure from the front. And that's like the dynamic of this new coach. That's what he wants, pressure from the front, because honestly, in previous season, he saw that the back four wasn't that strong, and so the philosophy of coaching this guy, so he's willing to sacrifice goals to make sure that the team doesn't suffer them, and that's the talent that he has. And of course, there's rumors that he's looking for a new striker that fits his model and things like that. And the fans are mad because they're like, well, we just paid a bunch of money to this guy. Now this guy is on the bench and things of the nature. So tell me, like, sometimes like how much pressure goes into these coaches, and how much strong sometimes you have to be to mute, to not listen to the fan base and just go along with your philosophy, and then use the data to also like go along with it to try to be successful, because it is working as much as he's not doing good finishing, because he's not. And tell me now also, like on that standpoint, like how can I make this guy, because I see this guy, he's scared of taking the shot. He applies the pressure, he might take the ball, he might have an open shot, but he's not taking it. He's taking one too many dribbles. So now let me, I go back and I see that, but that's just from what I see. It's not by me looking at the data. So tell me now how I can improve throughout now 2 weeks now, added into third week, playing San Jose on the road coming up. How can I improve this guy game to be much better and to prove it by using the data in this example?
Well, I mean, you're saying something about the philosophy as well. These coaches are under a lot of pressure. Sometimes it takes years for you to, implement a style of play. We have a coach in Brazil called Denise. He does incredibly well, like with the passing, short passes, and very dynamic way of playing. But sometimes he doesn't really get the results. But he's standing by it. He's doing that for years now, and I think he's going to succeed with it. And sometimes you really have to fight for it, and then really do what you believe in. So, but going back to the question about how he can improve a player. I'm quite confused about the question again. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah. Okay, let's say like how can you improve like even like because I see like his ego, he's not confident, because he's doing what he's accustomed to, but he knows that the guy that is now bench is a guy that is a true finisher, and he's not even trying to finish. First of all, and how can now I look at the data and things like that, and then throughout the practice I can say, hey man, like it's your time to shine. It's okay for you to take the shot as well, or I can just show him with data. Hey, look, you had this gap, this space here. Why didn't you took the shot? How can I change the mentality of the pro by maybe using evidence that
yeah. I mean, it also depends on because one thing it's very important to mention as well is that we always. The players that we work with, we are very careful knowing the kind of style of play of the manager, because sometimes we don't want to get too tactical because it could be in conflict with what the manager actually wants. So we analyze the way they play, and sometimes we ask them questions as well. If they'll ask to do that kind of play or that kind of behavior that they have, if you will. So, but sometimes, yeah, I mean, it's quite easy to show them with evidence, with the data that we have. So basically, if they have a good space to take a shot, if they didn't, we would, be showing them, look, the next time we could take a shot from there. And the chances of you scoring from that sort of position, and then we give them a kind of a number as well. So the probability that would be to score from that sort of position. So yeah, I mean there's a number of ways we can help a player to see where the areas that they can actually have better judgment and better decision making. Because sometimes it's down to their decision making. We have so many players. I mean, even in Europe, you see quite a lot of talent sometimes with a lot of technical skills and ability, but sometimes they have a poor decision making. So that is not going to take them to the very top of the game, because you see all the best players in the world. They think really fast. They are very good at taking decisions and changing situations in the games. And some other players are not. They don't have that kind of ability. So it depends. It's on a one-to-one basis that we sometimes we're able to spot that.
Others that because I'm intrigued, and obviously, like you say, it depends on the player and things like that. But how does a typical, I guess, a more common relationship work? Like, let's say I'm the player, like I reach to you, right? And then you show me some data, and then I guess you tell me like some things I need to improve. But how do I go about it? Like I go about it, and let's say I'm a professional player, right? I go about it in terms of like I show it to my strengthening coach, I show it to my coach, or I do it on my own after practice. How does that because the relationship is key here between all these parties involved in it?
Well, there's even cases where we worked with a couple of players from a team, and we're talking to the analyst quite a lot as well. So basically, we're doing some team analysis for the analysts and also individual analysis for the players. So sometimes we exchange ideas, and sometimes we would, see if the things were actually in line, because I wanted some information from the coach to see if the players were doing this because they were just bad decision making, or because the coach was asking them to do so. But usually the players, we have meetings with them, and then they analyze the material. We send them some physical material as well, and they analyze it prior to the game and some, and post match as well. And also, what we do, we kind of we help them analyze the opponents. So obviously, we don't want to get too deep in that because we don't want to go against with what the coaches are saying, but we kind of like show them the players that they are facing, the kind of threat that they could have. So if we play, if we helping a centre back, we kind of like show them the offensive system of the other team, the threat that he'll be facing. If we playing against, if we helping a striker, we kind of like show the defensive system of the other teams and the players they are likely to face and the way they play, their weaknesses and their strengths and things like that.
So before we wrap up, tell me, like, because I'm intrigued, because a lot of these analysts, the team analysts that are hired full time, one or two, depends on, on the team or more, obviously. But tell me, like, especially if it's like real time stats, right? Tell me, like, how will they work? Let's say like I'm in the press box, right? And I got the laptop and I'm the team analyst, right? And I'm out there because I have the view, the sky view from all the players and the formation. And obviously that's why I'm sitting there. But tell me, like, how I'm using you guys, right, to do real-time stats. How does that communication work? Like, do you have to be there? Is it like remotely and the software gets uploaded? And, tell me how that can work so I can then maybe go at halftime and tell the coach, hey, man, this is something that we notice in real life,
Yeah, I mean, there's some other thing that is quite important to mention. The work that we do, we don't. It's kind of like a way of giving you more body on the ground, if you like, because sometimes the clubs they have their own analysts, they have their analytical team, and it's all very good. But what we're giving them is more analysts because we have a bunch of analysts here working on 24/7. So what we're providing is more. So and also to have that kind of like cold analysis from outside. So basically you have your own, but sometimes you can be biased because you're there, you're on the training sessions, you're on the games, and you know exactly how the player performed, but you're there talking to the player every day. But when you have some analysis coming from outside, and that can be very, very helpful. And in regard to the live data, we have our analysts doing the coverage. So with the clubs that so far the clubs we worked with, we sent the data to the analyst at half time, and the analyst goes to the coach and then the assistant, whatever, and they assess the data there and try to make adjustments for the second half. It works really well because sometimes you can see from a different perspective how the team is being attacked and how they are attacking the areas that they need to be more defensive, or the areas they need to be more attacking, the weaknesses of the opponent. So it's very complete in the sense that it gives you that margin of competitiveness. So yeah.
Absolutely. I really want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, I think we covered quite a lot today.
I appreciate it. Again, for everybody that is wondering how they can get in touch, with this team, with this company and things of the nature, and for any level, it's theowlstats.com. You can visit us on the website and everything, but I will throw all the links in there as well, so you can be in touch with them. I really want to thank you for your time. It's been a different conversation, a conversation that is oftentimes only looked by experts and not noticed by fans and people around soccer. But there's many coaches out there that could really use your services, and because a lot of coaches are struggling. They are struggling how to use new methods to be able to coach better. And if they coach better, the results are there, that they can put it on the resume and continue to grow themselves. Their careers and things of their nature. But I really want to thank you for everything, and thanks for everybody listening.